I'm curious, when would you say was like one of the first times that you might have recognized, I do have the gift of leadership?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Honestly, I would probably took me longer to recognize it than I know my mom. My mom always kind of said, you're a leader, you have a natural born leadership. Actually, my grandma, every day before we went to school, we spent the night with her, which we spent the night with her a lot, and she would say, okay, be a good leader and example today. And that was like, I heard that every single morning. So I think I constantly was like prepped, even from the time of a young age, to be a good leader and example in what I was doing. But I didn't really think about it. Like in 7th grade, middle school started, girls start to get mean in middle school. And I told my mom, I was like, this is ridiculous. I have got to do something about this. So I told my teacher, I said, can I meet with all of the 5th grade girls? She said, yeah. And so I had a meeting with all the 5th grade girls as my 7th grade self, and I said, listen, you're about to step into middle school, things are gonna get weird, you're gonna get insecure, and girls are gonna be mean. I was like, don't do it, don't fall into the trap. And so my mom would say, that was you leading, and at the time I didn't recognize it, but now as I got older, I started to realize, wow, God, like you did put this gift in me. And it's actually, I read this verse, Hebrews 10:35, and it kind of changed my idea of even myself, because I think for a long time I thought like I needed to be confident in myself before I could really lead, but that just wasn't happening, because you're a girl, you're in high school, things come up, insecurities come up, and I read Hebrews 10:35, it said, so then do not forget the confident trust that you have in the Lord, for that will be richly rewarded. And I thought, wow, that doesn't mean I have to be confident in me, that means I have to be confident in who made me, and through that trust, man, maybe I could really do something, not because of my power, but because of God's. And I think that really equipped me and empowered me to start really leading.
So good. And I want to highlight a couple of things that you said in there. One would be just for parents. And if you heard what you heard growing up is be a leader and be an example. And just those words can empower your children to think in a different way. And then Sadie, you said you didn't even recognize or realize that you were leading. And I think there may be some people right now that you don't even recognize in this moment, at this time, you are leading and making a difference. And so just look at what you're doing and call it what it is. You are leading right now. Feel the power, the weight, the responsibility of that you are a leader. You do lead so many more things, and you're interesting to observe, but you're like 100 times more interesting when you get to know all the details. Just to help our audience kind of get to know what you do, can you describe what you oversee, how you make an impact? What are some of the different ways that you do have influence?
Yes, I can try. I'm not the best at answering this question. People say, what do you do? And my husband will make fun of me because literally somebody in public will be like, oh, so what's your name? They've never heard me. They say, Sadie, what do you do? And I'm like, I blog, like, oh man, I'll say something random, that has to do with kind of what I do. But really, I love people, I love God, I love both of them intertwined. And so I started a ministry called Live Original. And through that, I've written 3 books. I started a tour, clothing company, podcast. Anything I can do to reach people by the love of Jesus is kind of what I'm doing on a social platform or whatever that looks like. And I have a team of 3. So 3 girls are on my team full time. They're amazing. I love my team. And through those 3 girls and myself, I work with several other people groups to get the whole job done. Yeah, that's my team. They're the best. And so, yeah, we're constantly saying, how can we reach this generation with the love of Jesus? And that looks a lot of different ways.
So you make me laugh because you just said a blog, a podcast, I write. You just said you write books and start a clothing company. That's a lot. In fact, that's a lot of massive leadership responsibilities. And you have assembled a good team of other leaders. We might have some other people that are forming their teams. What qualities do you look for in those people to assemble the leaders around you?
Yeah, absolutely. It came so organically how the 3 of these girls ended up in my life. I actually, the first one, I think this is a cool story. So I met her and we were hanging out and she was doodling. And I said, wow, you are so good at doodling. She was like, thanks, yeah, it's kind of a side thing. I said, well, what are you doing? And she said, I'm in marketing. I said, oh, cool. I said, so is that what you're passionate about? She was like, well, I guess not really, actually, but that's what I do. I was like, oh, okay, like, do you feel like you're kind of doing what your purpose is to do, though, through it in a way? And she's like, no, I've never really thought of that. I said, what are you passionate about? She said, I'm super passionate about creative things. It's actually funny you mentioned doodling. And I said, huh. So we started talking, and I said, well, I'm kind of wanting to start this Instagram, and my whole message is to live original. I would love to make original content. Do you think you can help me with that? She's like, yeah, I could do some things. Now she works for her full time. She's the one that started a clothing line. She does all of our graphics for our Instagram, for our podcast, our blog, everything. She's, ran the original account that now has over like 200,000 followers on Instagram. And so through her creative talent, God's really done something huge in our teamwork and doing it together. And so I think you ask people, for me, and all three of them, what are you passionate about? What do you feel purpose to do? And if it aligns with what you're trying to do, and it's a skill you don't have, you're like, we should partner. Because she's way more creative than I am. And I'm so glad I have her on my team.
Well, you've obviously surrounded yourself with really great people. And it sounds like you are not just giving them tasks to do, but you're giving them real significant leadership responsibility. And so that requires trust both ways. You have to trust them.
For sure.
And then for so many people to follow you, to look up to you, to listen to your message, they have to trust you. Can you talk to me both ways? How do you learn to trust your team? And then secondly, how do you create trust with those who are
So good. This is a great question. And that's something I struggle with. Trust is so big for me. It's so crucial. Trust is big for everybody. I feel like everybody says that. Trust is so big for me. And with these girls, we're really close. I've asked them the hard questions. They've asked me the hard questions. We've said the hard things, but we've also celebrated each other in the high moments in life, the good moments in life. We've really invested in each other's life. I know that's not everybody's story in leadership. Some people run companies or churches with hundreds of people, and you can't do that with everybody. But I think if you can invest in somebody's life in the highs and lows, it naturally builds such a trust. And we really talked about, there was a strength finder thing. I read the book Dare to Lead by Brene Brown, and you were supposed to pick 2 of your strengths that you kind of wanted everything to evolve around. And there was like 55 amazing words, and it's really hard to narrow down just 2 out of 55. And but somehow we did, and I landed on faith and authenticity. That was what I really wanted. Everything that Liberal is to be rooted from faith and authenticity. And so I think when we know what our game plan is, and we're like, okay, we can trust each other with that, we're like, we know that we're going to go out and it's going to somehow impact people with faith, and it's going to be authentic, and we're going to be a good sister and a friend. That's kind of our mission. So I think if you're on the same page, you can trust people knowing like we're going the same lane, and you also have the relationship to say, hey, that was a little off, or that wasn't your best, but here's how it could be better, those type of things.
So you do, as a leader and a communicator, you ooze authenticity, and I think that really does create a sense of trust with both your team and those who look to you. What advice would you have to a leader to create more of a climate of authenticity when I think so many leaders feel pressure to portray, look, I'm perfect, or I'm strong, I'm confident? What would you say to an emerging leader to help create more of a spirit of authenticity?
So great. Well, I think whenever you're authentic and you are just real with people and you let people in and what you're going through, it really helps you get to where you're going faster, right? And so for me and my team, I've seen so many times, time after time, where I say, hey, I feel like we should talk about this subject because I think this generation really needs it. But to be honest, I'm really struggling with this. And when we talk about it, it's amazing the talking points that will come from that end up being in my message. And so as a leader, it only makes you better to be authentic and to be straight up with people, especially as a young leader. I think, this generation craves authenticity because so many things were fed or fake. You can filter anything, you can caption, you have the ability to work on your caption, you work on what you're going to say. These can be clipped, these can be edited out. But when somebody sees something real and genuine, they crave that. And so I think for being a leader in this generation, it's one of your biggest assets is to be authentic, because that's when you really have people listening.
I think it's such good advice because I think a lot of leaders right now when the world is so crazy, we want to portray a lot of confidence, and sometimes we're not having it. And so I think that what you said really could connect with people, that it's okay not to know it all, and to bring your real self. So I'm curious, what's fascinating is you both have a rocket ship trajectory of success, meaning you lead really big, successful, high-impact organizations. At the same time, you're also kind of in season 1, meaning you're having success, but you're still in a startup. What advice would you have for other leaders that are starting something right now? What's something you've done right or something you might do differently?
Yeah, that's great. I always just said, you're not going to know it all. You can't know it all, right? And my grandpa actually said this, and this helped me so much, because starting something is, it's scary, and it's hard. And for us, we started something, and then it became big really fast, but we're still a startup. So yes, we have all these people watching, but we're young, and we're gave me this, it was like 21 ways to be successful. And he said, I want you to read this. I want you to come back and tell me your favorite point. And I came back to my favorite point was, if you fall in public, then you'll get up twice as fast. And I was like, that is so true. I mean, physically, if you fall in public, if you face plant, you're going to get it fast. But actually, it's the same in life in general. If you make a mistake, you're going to learn twice as fast if it's in public. And so for us, we keep that in mind. We're still young. We're still growing. We don't know it all. We're going to mess up. We're going to fall. Sometimes I misspell stuff on my Instagram all the time. That's a silly thing. But hey, somebody's going to correct you real fast in public, right? The first comment will be like, you spelled there wrong, you know? And so I think if you fall in public, you get it so much faster. And as a startup, I tell people who are young, like, you're not gonna get to a place where you're like, okay, now I'm ready because I'm so confident, because I know this is perfect, because I know it's gonna be right, because I know it's never gonna fail. Like, those things aren't gonna happen. You just have to start, and you have to have humility. That's like a huge thing. You have to know that it's not always gonna be perfect, and it's not always gonna go right, but you're gonna get to where you're going through falling a few times.
So I just want to highlight so many things you said. One thing that you said I think was brilliant. Your granddad had you read through a book and give back thoughts on what impacted you. And again, to parents, I just want to say this is one of the greatest things you can do. I do this with my kids. I pick books, and I actually pay them, which then you can argue this is the best thing not to do. But I pay them a certain amount of money to read through the books, and then they give me reports. And I think that has helped you in your leadership. And every time we talk, 2 or 3 different times, you'll tell me what Nikki Gumble said to you, what Louis Giglio said to you, what your grandfather said to you, and in so many ways, I think you are great because you've been a student. Talk to us about what mentors and other people have meant to your life as a developing leader.
So much. Be a student, be a student, be a student. I would say that to everybody, which goes back to the humility. You know, I think for the younger generation, I would just say, like, be confident in who you are, absolutely. Like, there's so much zeal to you, and there's so much talent in you, but at the same time, you do not know it all. And that's okay. And the older generation has gone before you. They've probably done similar things or the things that you want to do. And so it's so important that we learn from them. I was actually with Louis Giglio just this week, and I said, hey, Louis, give me 2 ways that I can be better as a communicator. And he did. And I was like, you've heard me speak, what's something I could be better at? And he told me, and I was like, thank you. That's actually so helpful. I'm going to apply that in my life. And so just constantly learning. Nikki Gumble said something to me one time, because I was asking him, I started a podcast, and I want to interview him. He's brilliant at interviews. He said, I ask people questions that I already know the answer to, because I'm setting them up for success. Things like that I just say, okay, I'm going to put that in my back pocket. So when I interview people, I study them for so long before I interview them. I know what they're going to say, but I want them to hit the home runs. So stuff like that, like, you just wouldn't know if you didn't ask. And even older people believing in you, it adds so much confidence. So they would say to the older generation, it means so much when you believe in us. Even you asking me to be here, that creates such a confidence in me to say, okay, God, like, that means that you're going to say something through me. That if somebody would believe in me like that, God, then I want to know what you have for me. You know, I'm going to be confident in that too. So for the younger, be confident and be humble, Lord. And for the older, thank you for speaking into us and believing in us, because it really matters.
Well, I do believe in you. I believe you have real greatness in you, and it shows in so many ways. And I love the fact that you're a student, and you highlighted something. You just said, Louis, give me 2 things to help me be better as a speaker. And I think that's something that anybody can do, is they can ask a question, but you still seem to draw more out of mentors. Talk to an emerging leader about how can you get the best, how can you absorb knowledge from those around you, and use that to help make you better in other ways. How do you get the most out of your mentors?
I think the most out of your mentors is, again, you gotta be authentic, you gotta be vulnerable, you gotta be real, you gotta say, hey, this is what I'm struggling with, and be willing to listen to the answer. You know, I could have said, Louis, give me 2 ways that I can be better, and then be like, well, I'm not doing that, because I totally got this figured out. No, you have to say, no, that's so helpful, because I haven't really thought about that, or I haven't succeeded in that yet. And then ask them a question, well, how did you get past that hump? You know, how did you get to where you're going? I think just asking a lot of questions, you know, and also letting them speak into you, listening to the answer, being willing to listen to the answer, even when it's hard. Even going to a mentor and, you know, saying, what books have you read that really helped you and impacted you? Me and Kristen asked, like, almost every married couple we meet, what was, like, the one thing in marriage
mentors, and then you're also a mentor to like literally millions of people. And I know there are a lot of leaders right now that you can have a team of 2, a team of 200, or you can have speaking to almost 400 Instagram followers. How do you deal with the weight and responsibility of influence, knowing that what you say, what you show, what you portray really does impact people?
Yeah, honestly, a lot of prayer, because I can't carry that. You know, I remember having a really real honest prayer with God right after my following started growing, and I was like, God, I'm really scared, and I think you chose the wrong person. I literally said that. I think you chose the wrong person because this really, really scares me. And what was cool is I just remember the Lord meeting me in so many moments and kind of coming to this revelation that, like, man, every place that fear is, their fear is conquered, because every place that I walk into afraid, that's every place that God has met me in the most significant ways. And it is weighty, and it is a lot, but I pray a lot, and that helps. But if I'm not reading the Word, and if I'm not reading prayer, and if I ever think it's on me, I mean, it'll crush you. You know, it really will. Christine Kane says it all the time. She's like, if you let the spotlight on you be loud, brighter than the light of Jesus inside of you, the spotlight will crush you. And I've always held on to that. It's so true. You have to let the light of Jesus shine through you, and know that I have to know constantly that it's just not about me. At the end of the day, it's not for me to gain more followers. It's not for me to get more likes. It's not for me to get more attention. It's for God to get the glory. And in that, the weight is lifted because it's carried by Jesus with you. You know.
So you mentioned fear. As a leader, what makes you afraid now today?
Man, that's a great question. I mean, I still get afraid. Like, even right before here, I'm like doing my breathing techniques, like 3 seconds in, 6 seconds out. You know, like, I still get nervous. I don't think that well, I won't say that. I mean, the Lord, I have to remind myself, the Lord did not give us a spirit of fear, right? He gave us a sound mind. And I think about that a lot. I'm like, hey, Lord, if you didn't give me a spirit of fear, then give me a sound mind right now. And I do believe you can conquer fear through the power of God when you invite God in. But I do think that that's not just a one-time thing. I think sometimes that's a daily battle, and that's okay. But it's kind of nice because I know, like I just said, where that fear is, there that fear is going to be conquered. So even though right before I get on stage, I'm like, okay, God, I need you to breathe through me. I need you to speak through me. I know that these words are going to be powerful, not my own, but through your power. But then I come out here, and immediately it's like peace, because you just feel His presence. And so I think as a leader, and people going through, leadership things, maybe you are an influencer, maybe you have a lot of attention on you. It's not that you're not going to be afraid, but it's that God is going to be with you in the midst of that fear. And so when you feel that fear, lean into it, and don't let that be an excuse to not do the thing that God's calling you to do. I learned that early on because I got asked to do something that I said no to. And my little sister asked me, she said, are you saying no? She said, is that because the fear is talking, or is that because you're talking? At 11 years old, she asked me that question. And I looked at her and I was like, I'm about to set an example to my little sister that fear is a good enough excuse to say no to God. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. And I ended up saying yes to that thing, and that was Dancing with the Stars. And it changed my life. And I almost let fear stop me from doing the thing that God was going to use to create the platform I have.
So let's just pause there for a moment and let that sink in, because there could be somebody listening or watching right now that is feeling drawn to something or has an opportunity, and fear is trying to talk you out of it. And even the quote I talked about this morning is sometimes the pathway to your greatest potential is straight to your greatest fear. And so to get where you are today, you've had to press through fear after fear after fear after fear.
Yes.
And we're living in a really complicated season. I know there'll be so many leaders right now that just feel the weight of it. Like everybody else, I don't think I've been criticized more than I have been in this last season, because anything we do is getting shot at from polarized sides. How do you deal with, as a leader, maybe you can give some advice to help other leaders that are growing in their ability to handle criticism? How do you handle those who shoot at you unfairly?
Yeah. Well, the truth is, like, if you're a leader, you're just gonna get criticism. I mean, like you said, my grandma, again, referencing my grandparents, they apparently said some amazing things in my life, but she would always say, if you're holding the football, you're gonna get tackled. I mean, simple. It's just how it is, and it's true. But I think, I love what somebody said earlier, that she said that she actually asked her critics, how can that help? Like, say like, oh, block, delete, that never happened, but it did happen, and people really did feel a certain way. And there are some things that are just crazy that need to be blocked and need to be deleted. But then there are some things that I think you can look at and say, okay, I'll take that into consideration. But to be honest, with criticism for me in my life, it is hard at times. It would be silly to say that it never hurts. But at the same time, I'll always say, don't let those people's opinions be the ones that matter in your life. Like, you have so many people who do love you, who believe in what God's calling you to. Don't let that one person's opinion stop you from everything that God's called you to. And if you're not careful, it really can. And it happens in the silent ways. It creates a little insecurity in your heart. But then you don't realize how that one comment that you read 3 years ago is still replaying in your head whenever you're going to do something. So it's super important that you don't let those things take root in your life, and that you actually get them out, no matter how silly they might sound. I think it's important to pay attention to, but it's super important to not let that drive the ship of your life.
So good. Sadie, I've been really impressed with you and Christian, and your just kind of your willingness to wade into what might be controversial areas and use the influence that you have to lead toward what you believe can be life-changing, can be healing, is truth that can impact people's lives. It seems like there's a force, and I'm kind of debating you because I kind of know what that is, but what is it that keeps you grounded, keeps you on mission when it would be easy to give up or go home? Can you tell us what is it that just keeps you driving and showing back up?
Yeah, that's great. I mean, honestly, I can think of a few different things, but essentially it's that Christian and I, we both have the same mission, and that's to go and preach the gospel. It's just what you said earlier when you were talking about, like, if you're teaching, then keep teaching. If you're gonna preach, then keep preaching. If you're going to do this, then keep doing that. For us, like, we constantly want to influence people. We want to encourage people. And, I think about this a lot with Jesus. He even said, like, it's not shocking that we're getting criticism. He said, if they hate you, they hated me first. Like, this is a controversial gospel, but at the same time, this is hope for you. And so we constantly keep going because of that. And what helps keep us grounded is we have a lot of people who also believe that around us. We have our family, we have our friends, we have our team, my husband to constantly remind us of the goal of the end, which really is just what Jesus said, go and tell. Go into the world, go and preach the gospel. And so that's what we're trying to do, and that looks like different ways. I think some people think ministry or preaching the gospel is just working at a church. Sometimes that really is just how you run your Instagram. That is starting a podcast.